Hello and welcome to the Reuters Events Pharma Insights podcast, where we talk to some of the most influential, interesting and insightful people working in pharma today. At the Reuters Events Pharma conference in Barcelona, I talked to Mark Duman, founder of patient advocacy organisation Illuminate and one of the more persistent voices in the industry on the question of how seriously pharma companies take their patients. Mark has been in and around the pharmaceutical world for more than 30 years. His argument is a pointed one, that patient engagement, for all the rhetoric, tends to be driven by individual champions rather than embedded across organisations as the standard practice. We talked about what it would actually take to change that, what a framework for systematic patient engagement looks like across the whole life cycle of a medicine, from research through to commercial and post-launch. We got into his idea for a single industry-wide reference point that shows every stage where patients can and should have a voice, and whether in the end regulation is what it will take to make this a habit rather than a choice. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get stuck in with the first question. Where do you see patients fitting into the pharma landscape? Perhaps you could just elaborate a little bit about what you think their role is in this industry.
So, number one, thank you very much for the opportunity, Jonathan. So I am a recovering pharmacist, an embarrassed management consultant, and a proud patient and patient advocate. And the reason I say recovering is I think for many, many years of my career, I focused on the medicine, and sometimes forgot a little bit about the patient. And to answer your question as to where they should be working with pharma and indeed with health systems and med tech and digital health, I think not quite everywhere. I don't think we should be necessarily determining salaries of chief execs, although one could argue possibly. But given some of the salaries I've seen, but I think it's a case of right across what we call the asset. So, what should we be studying? What are the unmet needs that technology can help address, whether that technology, as I said, is a medicine, a med tech, or a digital device? How can we recruit appropriately to clinical trials that are focused on, not just the clinical needs, but on the patient needs and not being too onerous, right the way through to patient support programs, to patient access programs, to disease awareness campaigns. If you co-create and in some cases have patients innovate themselves, you'll end up with better products, better services and better outcomes, both for individual patients, but also for society.
Then, just to play devil's advocate, some pharma companies might say, well, we always do all of this patient engagement work. We have patient advocacy teams and patient communities and all sorts. So are they already doing this?
Yeah, I mean, some companies are doing more than others. Some are doing less than others, as that suggests. And I think the thing is, what are your insights? Where are you getting those insights? I sit here as a patient with diabetes, and I think, I'm on a couple of medications. I use some technology. I've had an issue with one of those medications, and I cannot get in touch with the pharma company to express my concerns with their delivery system in an appropriate way. And so my own lived experience suggests that there is listening happening, but not necessarily as much listening as possible. I think the other point is about not just quality and quantity, but the idea that, well, who are you listening to and what are they saying? And I think when you work with patient advocacy groups, which are wonderful organizations, often they're not fully representative of the patients that have that condition. It's slightly different in rare disease, where they tend to have a higher prevalence of membership. But again, you need to be doing this systematically in the same way that you invest a lot of money in talking to prescribers and talking to investigators. How much money do you invest looking at your budgets in talking to patients and participants at either side of the asset?
So would you say this is a cultural problem or is it a structural problem? Is it this lack of joined up thinking and responding to patient needs just simply because that's the way that they've always done it and that's the outcome?
Yeah, well, it's changed. I mean, I've been in the business now 30 plus years, and you can't see in a podcast, you would say, "Why, really? You don't look that old." But and my wife would say, "You do look that old," but that's another story. It is changing, and I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a case of we need to see leadership behind the patient engagement piece, and where we have seen certain companies, and I'm not allowed, well, maybe I'm allowed to name them, but where the chief exec is behind the patient engagement piece, I think we've seen much more operational success because it's installed in R&D, it's installed in communications, it's installed in medical affairs and commercial and launch excellence. So there are opportunities to do it across the piece. But what I've experienced, having worked with tens of medtech companies and pharma companies and digital health companies increasingly, is it's not systematic. It's often driven by champions. There's not necessarily standard operating procedures set up. And so my plea to pharma and beyond is, let's not just do activities, but let's align these activities across functions, across territories, and across brands and therapy areas. Let's appraise the impact that we're doing of our patient engagement, and then let's raise awareness at C-level within the organization and beyond, but also outside of the organization, and tell industry and society and healthcare systems that we are co-developing, co-designing solutions with and for patients.
So when we talk about what companies need to do differently, I think you have 4 A's, don't you? You talk about the 4 A's, the awareness, attitude, action, and accountability. Can you just talk us through that?
Yeah, well, slightly, yes, that is 4 A's, and the A's I look at are related to that. So activity is the one where lots of activities are happening, but there is there's not full alignment across the organization. And this is difficult. We're often talking to organizations that have 100,000 people working in them. What I also then say is, how do we appraise that in that patient engagement? Did the trial recruit quicker? Is there more, I don't like the word, but is there more adherence? Is there better medicines taking, improved medicines taking? Did we get to patients who previously were not diagnosed or didn't know about their disease? So don't just tell me about activities, but align those activities across the organization, appraise those activities, and then that's the last A is awareness. So make sure people know what we've done, where we've been successful, but also where we've failed, because sometimes patient engagement doesn't work and doesn't result in the outcomes you desired.
You've talked about an industry-wide initiative that could help them shift this, something you call the impact debt. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I've got this bee in my bonnet, and it might be either visionary or it could be hallucinatory. I'm not quite sure which side of it is, but back in 2017, EUPATI, the European Patients Academy, produced a great roadmap on patient engagement in the R&D cycle, and there's a quite comprehensive but slightly complicated single slide overview of where patients can be involved in that process. I'd like either EUPATI, dare I say, sorry for calling you out, but I'd like somebody or a group of people to update that, to broaden it beyond just R&D, but to look at the whole asset life cycle, and if possible, to look at also health tech, med tech, so not just pharma and medicines. But I'd also like to look at where's the guidance, where is there guidance, but where is there legislative mandated regulatory requirements to engage patients, and there are several points across the asset life cycle where we need to do that. And then could we have some simple case studies named across the organization so that I can sit as a CEO or as somebody leading the chief patient officer, look at this single slide and go, wow, these are all the color-coded areas I need to be engaging patients. Some of them I do, some of them I don't do, some of them are mandated, some of them are not. And lo and behold, these are some of my industry colleagues, partners, and in some cases competitors, and this is what they are doing. Because all of a sudden, when we publish, we're not hopefully publishing and being damned, but we're publishing and being actioned. And so I'm trying to find a collaborative, an organization that would support the update of that roadmap and a collation of good examples across the industry.
It reminds me a lot about sustainability debates, where companies are constantly being encouraged to be sustainable, but in the end, what really moves the needle is regulation. Do you think we're getting to a stage where we have to stop talking about companies sort of stepping up, or just because they want to be nice guys and nice ladies, but actually stepping up because they'll be in trouble if they don't?
Yeah, it's like seatbelts and all the, Well, but then again, no one mandates us to brush our teeth twice a day. And that's become the biggest single public health intervention globally. So I think sometimes where there's something that's easy to do, people clearly see the benefits. So I think there is a bit of regulatory push involved, but I also think there's something about more clearly articulating the benefits of patient engagement. And when, profit and pipeline are pushed, sometimes sadly the patient bit gets thrown out. And I think that's partly because we've not articulated the value clearly enough, both within the individual companies, but also across the industry and more broadly across the healthcare system.
So here we are in Barcelona. You're talking to a lot of people here, trying to move minds and change the ways of companies. If there was one thing that you could leave the delegates and the attenders here with, one thing to take back to their organizations next week, what would you say? What would make the biggest difference to you?
So on a podcast, this is going to sound interesting, and as a creationist, which we can talk about in the pub later, you've been given 2 ears and 1 mouth. Perhaps you should be listening twice as much as you talk. So listen to patients, listen to healthcare systems. Don't just look up, but listen outwards.
Mark Duman, thank you so much for talking to us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Mark Duman there, patient advocacy campaigner and founder of Illuminate. And the observation that for all the industry's talk of engaging patients, 2 ears and 1 mouth is a ratio it has not yet perhaps fully honoured. That's it for this edition of Reuters Events Pharma Insights. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with friends and colleagues and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss our next conversation with another outstanding leader from across the pharmaceutical and health science world. We're on all the usual platforms, and do watch out for our next episode where we'll be talking to some of the most insightful leaders in pharma today. Until then, goodbye.